How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. I hope you got blue skies where you are. Finally, today I do. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, and you get the show notes. You get a discount on the show notes subscription. Get the podcast, the live stream, the social media links to everywhere. Follow me on Instagram as I do some cooking this week. I put up those pictures on Instagram and Facebook. Okay, we got to talk about the rent-a-mobs. How do I want to start this? You know, I do this show off the top of my head without a script. And every once in a while, I was like, I want to talk about a heady topic, and how do I want to begin? Just so I'm playing it straight here. I'm not trying to be the rabbit attack dog here. Let me start it this way. I believe in real truth. Today, a lot of people say, my truth is this, my truth is that, and I don't care what your truth is. I care what the truth is, because there is truth. Now, truth is sometimes hard to grasp. Sometimes it's nuanced, and we don't do nuance well as a people anymore with the rise of the internet. But there has to be knowable truth. And here's why, and this actually is at the end of the day, it's a theological point I want you to understand. In the New Testament, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If he says he is the truth, and who is he? He is God. If he says he is the truth, then the truth is knowable. It's not a coincidence that in Marxist political theory, the truth isn't knowable. I mentioned critical theory earlier. Let me dive into critical theory a little more. Critical theory is Marxist political philosophy. Critical theory, Marxist political philosophy, argues there is no truth, that you have your truth, I have my truth, but there is no knowable, truly agreed upon truth. And the way, since truth is not knowable, reality is shaped based on words. And whoever controls the definition of the word controls reality. Whoever controls reality controls the truth. So the truth is an abstraction. It can be molded and it can be shaped. It's not actually knowable. It's not definite. It's not finite. It's not quantifiable. It's not touchable. It's not something that can be revealed. The truth is just at the long end of the equation. It's a variable that can be changed to suit your needs of power. So this is why, for example, I am opposed. Donald Trump, if you haven't heard, Donald Trump is pressuring Goldman Sachs to fire its chief economist. The chief economist from Goldman Sachs, which is the most prestigious banking institution in Wall Street, insists that the tariffs are going to have a negative effect on the economy. So Donald Trump is demanding Goldman Sachs silence their economist. This is something you expect from Beijing, not from Washington, D.C. This is something the communists do. And so I'm appalled at the behavior of the president, who doesn't want to win on the facts, He's trying to shape reality. He's trying to silence the dissent to shape reality. This is what communists do. And I'm not saying he's a communist. I'm saying this is a tactic communists deploy. And so the president should not, if he's going to win the argument, win it on the truth, not by silencing everyone else. It is akin to you being bullied into believing the sky is green. And if everyone who says the sky is blue is censored and only the people who say the sky is green are allowed to speak, at some point, if not you, your kids certainly begin to believe the sky is green. That color in the sky is actually green, not the color of the grass. Whoever controls words controls reality. Whoever controls reality controls truth. That's Marxist theory. And the way the Marxists deploy it is they silence people. They silence people. What they do, what they intend to do is they censor. So they don't allow people to come on their television shows to tell you the truth. On MSNBC, they allow on the people who say there's no crime problem in D.C. So people who watch MSNBC believe there's no crime problem in Washington because they don't bring on people to actually say, yeah, actually there is a crime problem in Washington, D.C. and something needs to be done about it. They shape the truth. What they do is what they call it is subverting the dominant paradigm. The way you subvert the dominant paradigm is you silence people who have the moral power in the country, because the people who have the moral power in the country are typically white heterosexual men. And so you have to silence the white heterosexual men to subvert the dominant paradigm, because according to Marxist theory, the people who have the real power are the oppressed. And so the way you elevate the oppressed is to silence the oppressor. And what the Marxists hate is freedom. They hate free speech, because if there is free speech, they can't silence the majority. They hate academic freedom because they can't censor the conservative academic. They hate your freedom because with your freedom, you have the opportunity to protest. And as long as there is someone who can speak up and protest, they don't have the power they want to have. And that is why, for example, I think that when the president, who is a Republican and a populist on the right, tries to silence the chief economist of a private entity, we should all stand up and say this is wrong, because it's what the left does, trying to silence people they disagree with. And those of us on the right should not engage in that tactic, because if we do, we find less people willing to actually speak truth to power in the way it needs to be spoken of. This isn't actually about Trump, though. It's a great current present example of what's going on. And what the left does to try to shape reality is they try to co-opt institutions that shape standards, and then they try to manufacture images that portray reality that are fake. This is from the New York Post. Several lefty dark money organizations, including George Soros's, contributed more than $20 million to groups funding protests against Donald Trump's crime crackdown in Washington. Free DC, a fiscally sponsored special project of progressive nonprofits, Community Change and Community Change Action, brought 150 demonstrators near the White House Monday to protest Trump's plan to deploy National Guard troops in the district. Do not obey in advance and take up space are among Free DC's guiding principles, and the group urges supporters to go outside at 8 p.m. and bang pots and pans, sing, chant, or make noise for 5 minutes every night of this occupation. Free DC has scheduled multiple events since Monday's anti-Trump protest, including a cop watch training, suggesting further protests are planned amid Trump's effort to make DC the safest, cleanest, and most beautiful city anywhere in the world by ramping up law enforcement efforts and removing homeless encampments. George Soros' group is now funded by Alex Soros. Alex Soros is his young son. He's put in charge of his political operation. Alex Soros is one of those good progressives who doesn't think there's a crime problem, because Alex Soros lives in a fancy apartment with security at the bottom and never has to touch the masses. And this is why progressives keep losing, because they keep trying to change reality by changing the words. And you can't change the word murder when people are getting gunned down on the streets of Washington, D.C. But it's not just that. Crowdsondemand.com. Crowdsondemand.com. It's a website. Crowds on Demand is your home for impactful advocacy campaigns, demonstrations, PR stunts, crowds for hire, and corporate events. Services available nationwide. Are you looking to create a buzz anywhere in the United States? At Crowds on Demand, we provide our clients with impactful advocacy campaigns and events. We are best known for organizing passionate demonstrations, rallies, flash mobs, corporate PR events, and lighthearted events such as paparazzi, brand ambassadors, and PR stunts. We also have virtual capabilities, including letter writing, social proof, and phone banking campaigns. We can create turnkey advocacy groups complete with qualified, passionate leaders to staff them all on relatively short notice. These services are available across the country at every major U.S. city, every major U.S. metro area, and even most smaller cities as well. We even do campaigns abroad, coordinating with international partners as needed. We provide everything, including the people, the materials, and even the ideas. You can come to us with a specific plan of action, and we can make it happen, or you can approach us with a general idea and we can help you plan the strategy and execute it. We do protests, rallies, advocacy. We have audiences. We do corporate events. We do fan displays. They brag about being covered in The Atlantic, CNN, News Nation, Fox News Radio. They actually are rent-a-mobs. They try to shape reality in the image of reality by bringing in protests. But see, that's you can't shape the image of a 5-year-old gunned down in Washington, D.C. You can try to dismiss that crime. You can try to say there is no crime. You can try to play the word games of the left. But ultimately, the truth is knowable. The truth is ascertainable. The truth is the truth. You can't hide from it. Your sins will find you out. The truth will be found. It's not just in that regard. It's also the leftists in charge of, for example, the United Nations. Adam Credo has the story. The UN-affiliated watchdog group that recently declared a worst-case scenario of famine in Gaza quietly changed one of its key reporting metrics while doing so, making it easier to formally declare there's a famine in Hamas-controlled territory. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, IPC, a network of Western governments, the United Nations, and nonprofit groups, determined in a July 29th report the worst-case scenario of famine is currently playing out in the Gaza Strip, claiming that mounting evidence shows that widespread starvation, malnutrition, and disease are driving a rise in hunger-related deaths. Media outlets like the New York Times, NPR, CNN, and ABC relied on the IPC report to claim the Israeli policies led to mass starvation. Unlike previous IPC reports on the humanitarian situation in Gaza, the July report includes a metric known as mid-upper arm circumference. The agency has not historically used to determine whether a famine is taking place. The report also includes a lowered threshold for the proportion of children who must be considered malnourished for the IPC to declare a famine, down to 15% from 30%. Aid workers traditionally conduct detailed height and weight measurements to determine whether a child is suffering from acute malnutrition. MUAC, by contrast, consists only of a child's arm circumference, a measurement that can be done more quickly and is less precise. In the past, the IPC has declared famine after finding 30% of children in an area are suffered from acute malnutrition using their weight and height. In a recent Gaza report, the IPC said it would declare famine if 15% of children were suffering acute malnutrition using their arm circumference. It's a pretty big shift. They're lowering the bar. The progressives in charge are trying to change the words, the standards, and the definitions so they can declare something as reality, so they can declare genocide as reality, and it's a lie. That's what we have to stand against. That's why I think it's important that those of us on the right should call out the president when he tries to censor an economist at a private sector bank. Because let the truth win out. The truth is going to be found out. And if you try to hide the truth, then maybe he's got the truth on his side. Win with the truth, not with censorship. That's what the left does. The left wants to censor. The left wants to silence. We are not the left. Our ways are not their ways. And we have a massive growing movement of people in this country moving to the right because they see the left as trying to co-opt truth and degrade truth. And we should not behave the same way. Our ways are not their ways. And our ways have been winning elections. This crazy idea that we should behave like the left is wrong. We should not be behaving like Beijing. We should not be behaving like the communists. We should behave as if we actually take the truth seriously and stand for it. Greetings. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. Glad to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I'd be happy to have you. So I don't know if you know this or not, but this is a great moment. You probably know that Jimmy Fallon had on Greg Gutfeld the other night. Greg Gutfeld has a show on Fox News in late night. It was kind of his personal project to see if it could work, and it just exploded, and it gets more eyeballs than Colbert, Fallon, or Kimmel. And Jimmy Fallon on NBC's The Tonight Show had on Greg Gutfeld the other day. We now have the ratings. It's over a 50% increase in audience viewership. Over 50% increase in audience viewership on NBC. And people are kind of blown away by that. It was obviously not a contested partisan show. It was something that conservatives could also embrace. And people who watch Fallon, because he's the least political of the three broadcast late night ones. And, you know, if CBS is watching this, canceling Stephen Colbert, they really should offer a blank check to Shane Gillis if they want to save late night, because I suspect he could do something with it that Stephen Colbert couldn't. Stephen Colbert engaged in the politics of subtraction. He wanted viewers to know this show was for the left, about the left, and it was therapy for the left. Excluded an entire class of people who might otherwise want to see it. And this is, of course, what so many people at the broadcast networks do, is they exclude people on the right and then complain. And yet you bring Greg Gutfeld on Jimmy Fallon's show and the ratings explode. Give Shane Gillis late night and watch what happens to the ratings. CBS wants to get out of it. They shouldn't. They should just actually do like a comedy program with an actual comedian who people across the aisle support. Now, let me tell you about Hillsdale College. I support them, and you can too, at ericforhillsdale.com, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. You go to ericforhillsdale.com, you can sign up for one of their classes. Right now, one of the great classes they're promoting is their class on the Federalist Papers. Written by Alexander Hamilton and James Madison primarily, it was the propaganda put out by the drafters of the Constitution to support the Constitution and the arguments in favor of our constitutional system. And you learn about the Federalist Papers, you learn just how smart our founders were, how they had such a strong sense of truth and character, and how so many people who say this is constitutional or this is unconstitutional, they don't actually know what they're talking about, and you will. All you got to do at no charge to you is go to ericforhillsdale.com and sign up. There are 40 classes to choose from. If you don't like that one, they got chemistry, math, you name it, ericforhillsdale.com. Sign up now and get a little smarter at no charge with Hillsdale College. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, y'all, we got to talk about my least favorite topic. It's okay. We got to talk about Social Security. We actually do have to talk about Social Security. Because the New York Times has a piece about Social Security's 90th birthday. I want to just so you know, I played these clips earlier on MSNBC where Peter Baker of the New York Times, Anand Gerhardus, I mispronounced his last name, used to be at the New York Times, talking about how there's really not a crime problem in Washington, D.C. Now, contrast that with the black reporter Anthony Coley, who lives in Washington, D.C., who said everybody's concerned about it. You should know that there's a charitable fundraising effort underway with several $1,000s raised to challenge Peter Baker of the New York Times to walk through South Washington, D.C., a place Peter Baker has probably never been in his life, though he claims to be from the Washington, D.C. area. Falls Church is not exactly a third world crime hellhole like southern Washington, D.C. But if you watch MSNBC, or frankly, to some degree, you watch CNN or you read the New York Times, you're going to think there's no crime down in Washington, D.C. There's no problem in Washington. You are what you read to a degree, and the New York Times is running a propaganda piece on Social Security. It's turning 90, they say. Here are 6 myths about it that won't go away. The concept of retirement, as we know, was born 90 years ago this month. President Franklin Roosevelt signed Social Security into law August 14th, 1935, ushering in the idea of a time of independence from work. At that time, Americans had no meaningful way to plan for an income after work ended. Large-scale pensions and retirement savings programs did not exist. When most people stopped working, they either relied on family or became impoverished. Some wound up in poorhouses, government-run facilities that provided support such as shelter and food, often in exchange for work. Almost every state had them, and they maintained or mainly housed old people, says Nancy Altman, a Social Security advocate. It was in the depths of the Great Depression. Roughly half of America's elderly population lived in poverty. In the decades since, Social Security played a key role in providing economic security. So there are myths. 1, Social Security is running out of money. 2, aging boomers are the problem. 3, Social Security helps drive the deficit. 4, the trust fund is nothing but a pile of IOUs. 5, we need to cut benefits now to pay them later. 6, waste, fraud, and abuse abound. Those are the 6 myths the New York Times says about Social Security. There's just a problem. 5 of the 6 myths are actually true. This is from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. The New York Times says it's a myth Social Security is running out of money. The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget says the trust fund is projected to run out of money in 2033 by federal government's estimates. The New York Times acknowledges it's true, but then says Congress can draw on general revenue to keep the program going. The Congressional Budget Office assumes that will happen when the trust fund runs out of money, but the trust fund definitely is going to run out of money. So it's not actually a myth, despite the New York Times saying it is. The New York Times says aging population has always been anticipated, so it's actually a myth that aging boomers are the problem. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget retorts the fact that lawmakers have known about this problem for over 40 years and done nothing to solve it doesn't make its existence a myth. The New York Times says it's a myth that Social Security helps drive the deficit because the program is self-funded, even though it acknowledges that in several years it will need to draw from general revenues to help keep benefits going. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget notes that Social Security costs have exceeded revenue by $1.4 trillion since 2010, and the shortfall this year is $250 billion. That adds to the deficit, so it's actually true. The trust fund is nothing but a pile of IOUs. The New York Times says that's a myth. The bonds in the trust fund are not backed by any assets. They're not traded on public markets. They're a promise from the federal government. The federal government has made good on those promises so far, but that's all it is, a promise, which in the context of money can be called an IOU. The New York Times says it's a myth that we need to cut benefits now to pay them later. I suppose it could be called a myth to say need, but that's really an opinion question. Cutting benefits now to pay them later is certainly one way to go about fixing the program. As the Committee for Responsible Budget notes, acting sooner will literally reduce the necessary size of the adjustment. The only one of the 6 myths that's actually a myth is the final one. Waste, fraud, and abuse abound. There truly isn't very much fraud in the Social Security program in terms of improper payments. One could say the basic structure of the program itself is a fraud, but that's actually a law. The biggest myth about Social Security that is believed by both parties and needs to be busted is this: politicians can continue to ignore Social Security reform and everything will turn out fine. That's Dominic Pino at National Review, and he's right. So literally the New York Times writes an article, and if you are a reader of the New York Times, you believe it's a myth that Social Security is running out of money, and actually the government's own data shows it's running out of money. If you're a reader of the New York Times, you believe that the aging population of America is not actually a problem. And in fact, the government itself says that all the people, the baby boomers retiring, is a strain on the system. If you read the New York Times, you believe Social Security has no impact on the deficit. And actually, every year since 2010, the amount of payouts from Social Security have exceeded the trust fund. And so they've been relying on the general budget to fund it. So, yes, it actually is driving the deficit. Just think about this. People who read the New York Times, first of all, this sounds snotty and I don't mean it to be. Forgive me. But people who subscribe to and read physical newspapers tend to chart at higher IQs. This doesn't really have anything to do with the newspaper per se. It's just people who read tend to be smarter. It's why so many elementary schools are pushing kids to read books. The physical act of reading words on a page expands your brain. People who read newspapers tend to chart as higher IQ. I miss having a physical newspaper. I love physical newspapers. I read the New York Times. I read the Wall Street Journal. I read the Epoch Times. I read the Washington Post. I read the Atlanta Journal-Constitution here in Georgia, and I miss having a physical paper. I hate having to read on a screen. I think my retention is poorer for having read it on a screen than on the paper, and there's a lot of data to say that's the case. I want physical papers. That's why I don't like audiobooks. I have friends who talk about all the books they've read. They have not read a single page. They've just listened to someone talk to them in their car. They probably tuned out half of it. I'm sorry. Listen, this is not a slight. If you love audiobooks, God bless you. It's probably way better to get the audiobook than a lot of the trash that's out there in podcast form. But it's not the same as reading the actual book. And I don't read as much as I used to. You know, law school and then seminary just completely killed my desire to sit down and read for fun. I got a book in my book bag over here against the wall that I've been trying to read. Tom Coyne wrote a book about trying to qualify for the PGA. He's the head of Golfer's Journal. I love Golfer's Journal. I read Golfer's Journal when it comes. I read it cover to cover. It's one of the few things I sit down. I sit on my front porch with a cup of coffee, and I read Golfer's Journal. It's fantastic. It's people who love golf write this magazine. I love it. You should too. Let me know if you want a membership. I can get you one. And I love the printed page. I retain more when I read on a printed page. My kids used to be at a fancy private school that moved everything to tablets. They moved to a school that uses physical books. Their book bags weigh a lot. And the school has insisted that in their experience, the kids who read the books and used the books did better over time than the kids who used the tablets. So, you know, there's actually now a lot of research that shows that, and a number of schools, including some very fancy private schools I know in the Atlanta area that moved to tablets, are moving back to books because it turns out that kids actually read books and they retain it better. And this is why I miss physical newspapers. And I realize it's an environmental nightmare. You've got these piles of papers. What do you do with them? Well, you use them for litter boxes. You use them for the dogs. You use them for actually, my parents used to use their newspapers, and they'd put them down in the garden for weeds. They decompose over time, but it worked great as mulch. You put actual pine straw or mulch over the newspapers, and they keep the weeds out. I miss having papers. Now, that's really acknowledging this is a tangent from the actual point. But people who read newspapers, people who read books, they tend to have higher IQs. And it has a lot to do with reading words on the page. And as we get away from reading words and instead we're on screens or we're on audiobooks, our attention span wanders and our IQs go down. You know, there are a lot of people, one of the conspiracy theories is the fluoride. Fluoride is lowering people's IQ. That's not it at all. Singapore, for example, has higher fluoride content in its water than we do, and no one's accusing the Singaporeans of going dumb. You know what the Singaporeans do, though? They don't give their kids tablets in schools. They make their kids use physical books in schools. I would say the greater decline in IQ has more to do with getting rid of paper and the printed page. Nonetheless, a total digression from this. If you read the New York Times, you're not actually a dumb person, but you are a seriously misinformed person. Your newspaper is lying to you. The New York Times is lying to its readers, claiming these things are myths. This gets me back to Peter Baker. For those of you who weren't here in the first hour, let me play this again. This is Peter Baker from the New York Times on MSNBC.
Military troops in the streets of a capital, the kind of thing you see in other countries, in autocratic countries, but autocratic leaders who are trying to assert control and power. If you really cared about crime in the District of Columbia, where crime is actually down historically, if you actually cared about crime in America, there are cities with worse crime rates than Washington, D.C. He's not sending troops into their streets. He's sending troops into the streets of the nation's capital, which has a special resonance. The idea that troops would be patrolling in any way, a nation's capital sends a message that we've never, seen again in this country outside of, riots and genuine uprisings that we don't see right now. Crime is at a low. As anybody who has grown up in the Washington area, as I did, I was born and raised in the Washington area, spent my whole life there, and it's never. We know what a crime crisis looks like. We've lived through that. This is not what that looks like.
He's cherry-picking the data. 30 years ago in Washington, D.C., when Marion Barry was around, y'all remember Marion Barry? Crack cocaine was a massive epidemic. And the crime related to crack cocaine was through the roof. And it was not safe anywhere in Washington, D.C. And he's cherry picking, saying we're at a low. Yeah, you're at a low from the crack epidemic, but you're more than double the crime rate of 1960 if we want to go all the way back. It's funny, crime escalated in Washington after it was given home rule. And the people could start voting for themselves and voting for their leaders. And over time in Washington, D.C., the black residents started voting more and more overwhelmingly for a city council and mayor who were black. And those Democrats in charge were beholden to white progressives. And they placated the white progressives, and the quality of life began to decline for the residents. I suspect there will be a backlash from the voters in D.C. because the city council in Washington has gone so far now as to prevent the prosecution of anyone under the age of 17. If you're under the age of 17 in Washington, D.C. and you kill someone, you cannot be prosecuted as an adult. But the city council did. They got rid of cash bail. You go and you get charges pressed against you. In jail, you get out of jail. You don't have to pay anything. You walk out. The majority of crimes in Washington are actually done by criminals, by career criminals. It's not done by random people. There are estimated to be about 500 people in Washington, D.C. that if you arrested them, crime would drop dramatically. But the progressives, they won't do it. And the black politicians who are beholden to them, they won't do it. And if you listen to the voices of the New York Times on MSNBC or you read the New York Times, you're told there's no crime problem, which is not what you hear from people who actually live in Washington, D.C. Peter Baker can say, grew up in the Washington area. He can't say Washington, D.C. because he's not from there. These voices, these people, these reporters are lying. If you read the New York Times because you're actually reading a physical newspaper, the data says you're smarter than the average person. You have a higher IQ. But you're also more misinformed, ill-informed than the average person because the average person knows there's a problem in Washington, but you're reading a newspaper that makes a habit of lying to you. 10 banks have had their credit downgraded recently. Now they're going to keep making profits. There's probably going to be a bailout if things get worse. They might be sold to a mega bank. They might be consolidated. My friends at Swiss America have been warning people about a secret war on cash, an all-out assault on freedom. With soaring interest rates squeezing the economy and banks teetering on collapse, Swiss America wants to educate you on ways to help protect your hard-earned assets right now. Get their report, The Secret War on Cash. Your copy is free. All you have to do is call or text 800-289-2646. The all-out war on cash includes digital forms of currency. It's spreading. So read the Secret War on Cash report for free. All you have to do is mention me, Eric Erickson, when you call or text 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. You text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 289-2646 and follow the link, or go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric. SwissAmerica.com/ERICK. Message and data rates, they may apply. Swiss America would love to be able to help you. I want to give you the anatomy of a hit job. Keneal Patterson is a breaking news intern at the Daily Beast. She has a story. Veterans beg Ron DeSantis to stop killing them. Ron DeSantis is under fire for turning against his fellow service members and letting executioners slaughter 5 veterans this year alone. The governor, who served in the U.S. Navy as a commissioned officer, has called Florida the most veteran-friendly state of the nation. But during his reign, 9 people have been executed, including 5 veterans. And at the end, all the way at the end, Keneal Patterson highlights just one person, just one of the people executed, Jeffrey Hutchinson, a 62-year-old veteran with severe mental problems, executed in May for the murders of his girlfriend and her 3 children. His lawyers said he suffered from paranoia, PTSD from the war in Iraq, and health problems. That's the only one she highlights. Hey, curious, isn't it? Curious. She mentions several others, but she doesn't talk about what they did. Let me tell you what they did. Bobby Joe Long was an American serial killer and rapist. During an 8-month period in 1984, abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered 10 women in Tampa Bay, and was only executed in 2019. Dwayne Owen was an American murderer who raped and killed Karen Slattery and Georgiana Wardard in Delray Beach in Boca Raton in 1984, only executed in 2023. He stabbed to death and raped 14-year-old Karen Slattery. He raped and beat to death 38-year-old Georgiana Wardard in Boca Raton. Oh, and then there's Eddie James. Eddie James, who she refers to as Edward James, by the way, was an American murderer featured on America's Most Wanted. It led to his capture and conviction in 1993 for the murders of an 8-year-old and her grandmother. He sat on death row for over 30 years and was finally executed a couple of months ago. And this is a hit job by the Daily Beast, attacking Ron DeSantis for overseeing the executions of murderers who've sat on death row, some of them 30 years. And this is the attack, claiming that he's killing veterans as opposed to he's executing murderers, one of whom was a serial killer. And this Keneal Patterson of the Daily Beast never mentioned that fact conveniently.